We say hello with vagina.
Well, you could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that.
Well, I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting it. I want to make sure that
like
everything is good.
You're there.
Get the dress. Is everyone okay? They standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
And you're telling me it's implausible that that was a joke? Really?
Yeah.
That's your statement. That's implausible to have been a joke.
Yes.
As he's laughing saying it, again, implausible to be a joke.
Yeah, the reason why it's implausible to assume that he was joking is because at the start of the clip, Howard Stern maybe had a similar thought to yourself. Howard Stern said, shit, maybe he's joking. So then Howard Stern had him explicitly clarify that this is something he's actually done.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I stumbled across this video from a while back. In this clip, Dean Withers debates a conservative named Michael at a Turning Point event. So Dean Withers is challenging Michael on the double standards people hold when defending powerful figures. They get into a massive argument over whether political leaders should be held to basic moral standards or if extreme legal technicalities are the only thing that matters. Comment yes if you think leaders should be held accountable for things they brag about doing on tape. Comment no if you think they should only face consequences if there's a criminal conviction. Let's get into the video.
So let me ask you a question. Would you ever, do you think it's wrong for a man to go into private women-only spaces?
In general.
In general?
Yeah.
What about when that man goes into that space to exploit the people inside? All that I'm asking you is, let's just say, for example, a man were to unconsensually walk into a private woman's dressing room to look at the naked bodies of the people inside, would that be wrong?
Yes.
Okay. And if a man were to do that, what should their punishment be?
I think that would depend on what the court deems. I mean, sentencing is rather subjective when it comes to rule of law.
What do you think is fair? Like, I think that exploitation like that, I'm really far against it. They should be,
Oh, I guarantee you I'm further against it than you are in terms of sentencing. Like, if I were a judge and I had, ubiquitous authority to do whatever I wanted, that guy would probably get the death penalty.
Okay, so if a man were to walk into a private women's only space and look at the naked...
In a criminal court, yeah.
Okay, so if you knew for sure that a man had walked into a private women's only space to look at the naked women inside unconsensually,
yeah,
and you knew that for sure, you'd argue that they should die.
I would argue that if we had the proper culture, they should die. Obviously, we can't grandfather people in that did it, say, 20 years ago or 10 years ago. That's not how law works. If I make a law today that, guys that like other dudes get stoned, well, that's not fair to you. So you understand that we have to have some level of not grandfathering people in when we make new law. So yeah, I think the sentence should be death, but we can't apply that cross to people who did something, say, 20 years ago. Is that fair?
Well, I think that was funny, but no. So the retroactive application of applicability of laws, right, is definitely a conversation that we probably agree on. In many scenarios, it's hard to do so. In many scenarios, I also think it's justified. Think about the retroactive application of the two Geneva Conventions during the Nuremberg trials. Like, I'd say that was fair. But what I'd argue here is, regardless of what we'd want legally, I'm still saying, like, idealistically, right? If a man were to exploit a woman, if a man were to unconsensually walk into their dressing room while they're changing and look at them, idealistically, we could agree that that man, is somebody that we shouldn't look up to, is somebody that we should throw in jail, and idealistically is somebody that we both agree should die.
But I think we kind of agree, at least, that there should be some sort of sentence. I don't believe in prison.
Can we agree that that sentence wouldn't include making them president and giving them access to the governance of the most powerful country in the history of planet Earth as we know it?
Do we live in an oligarchy or a republic where people decide that answer?
Well, it's a constitutional republic, but I'm asking for your position.
My position? No, I don't in general think so.
Okay, so if Donald...
it depends. I think the time...
So if Donald Trump exploited women and girls by walking in their dressing rooms and looking at them while they're naked, would you still support him?
If I, independently of people's witness testimony, who's those I did not trust, could verify that as a fact, I wouldn't vote for him, no.
Would you say that fair verification for that fact would be an admission of guilt from Trump?
That would depend on what the admission of guilt looked like. Yeah, certainly.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that admission of guilt can look like different things. For example, if you and I say we were actually best friends.
He just said that. What if he just said that, hey guys, I did this?
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to get to that. So say you and I are actually best friends. We're pretty close in age. How old are you? 24, 23?
21.
20. Oh, awesome. You're doing phenomenal. I'm 24 years old. We could be friends in some universe. We're out for a drink, and I'm doing the thing that stupid guys do. I don't do this, but some guys do. They're talking, and they say, hey, You should have seen what I did last weekend, yada, yada, yada. It's called locker room talk. I'm sure you understand that. Even as a liberal, I'm sure you've had your...
Well, I think that men will boast about sexual relations with women to make themselves look cool, to climb that social hierarchy of making themselves seem more powerful, attractive.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever heard a prideful, boastful, egotistical man claim to have perpetuated sexual violence like exploitation, when in all reality they hadn't done it.
Well, just because you haven't heard of it happening before, how does that mean that you're verifying that it didn't happen?
Well, I'm saying that it is the case. It seems reasonably implausible that Trump would have done this, because you know that I'm referencing the clip of him talking, unless you could give good reason why it would be plausible.
This right here is where the entire foundation of the argument gets shattered, and it happens before the opponent even realizes he walked straight into a trap. Look at how Dean Withers sets this up. He does not start by throwing accusations or yelling. He starts with a fundamental moral question about boundaries and accountability. He asks a very simple question about whether it is wrong for a person to enter a private room non-consensually to look at people changing. And watch what happens when Michael answers. Instead of giving a measured response, Michael takes the bait completely and goes to the absolute extreme. Michael said this, like, if I were a judge and I had, ubiquitous authority to do whatever I wanted, that guy would probably get the death penalty. That is the moment the debate was already over. Because when you establish a standard that extreme for an abstract scenario, you are locking yourself into a corner that you can never escape. This is a classic logical trap where someone tries to sound as tough and righteous as possible to prove their moral standing, without realizing that the very behavior they just condemned to the ultimate punishment is something their preferred political figure has publicly boasted about. When Dean brings up the actual recording of the candidate bragging on tape about walking into dressing rooms during pageants, Michael immediately pivots to the most desperate defense possible. He claims it was just locker room talk or a joke, but look at how he tries to defend it. Michael said this, yes, as he's laughing, saying it again, implausible to be a joke. Think about how absurd that defense actually is. You just claimed seconds ago that anyone who invades someone's privacy like that deserves the absolute maximum punishment under the law, but the second it applies to a powerful figure on your side, suddenly it is just a funny story or a lighthearted joke. That level of cognitive dissonance is mind-boggling. When someone tells you who they are, especially on a recorded broadcast, brushing it off as humor is just admitting that your principles disappear the moment they become inconvenient for your political team. Dean did not even need to push hard here, because the contrast between Michael's initial moral outrage and his immediate backpedaling speaks louder than any argument ever could.
Like, for instance, I'll just play you this clip. Here's Donald Trump talking.
We say hello with vagina.
What you could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that.
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I want to make sure that
You're like a
everything
doctor.
is good.
You're there.
Get the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
And you're telling me it's implausible that that was a joke? Really?
Yeah.
That's your statement. That's implausible to have been a joke.
Yes.
As he's laughing saying it, again, implausible to be a joke.
Yeah, the reason why it's implausible to assume that he was joking is because at the start of the clip, Howard Stern maybe had a similar thought to yourself. Howard Stern said, shit, maybe he's joking. So then Howard Stern had him explicitly clarify that this is something he's actually done. And on top of that, considering the fact that we have corroborating witness testimony from many women and girls that he did this to, such as Mariah Belgado and 3 unnamed teens that competed at Miss Teen USA in 1997, giving the same consistent testimony, right, that this is what Donald Trump did to them. Donald Trump walked backstage, looked at them while they were naked and said, don't worry, ladies, I've seen it all before. Or unrelated women from unrelated beauty pageants in different years, like Miss Arizona in 2001 at Miss USA, a completely different pageant, saying the same exact thing, all in corroboration of one each other's testimony and in corroboration of Donald Trump's admittance of guilt. I'd say that it's not just implausible to posit that Donald Trump was joking when he made this admission, but fucking crazy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say impossible, and I was going to assume objectivity, so I was going to bully you a little bit. So here's my question, then, for all of this. He's been convicted of this, right? I gotta...
Inside of a criminal court?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, why not?
Why not?
Do we have due process here? That's a question I have.
We do have due process.
We do. So if there were independent verification that went through a court, right, not a 21-year-old's mind, that went through a court system, and he was convicted in a criminal court, then we could make some conversations about eligibility to run for office. I'll give you an example. I live in Houston, Texas.
Can I respond to that?
Can I just give you my example real quick?
Yeah.
I live in Houston, Texas. There's a county judge who switched to Republican after they caught him, allegedly, violating campaign finance law. Switched Republican, then started calling it a witch hunt. Typical thing that, Democrats will do on occasion. It's happened quite a bit in Houston. And I've said, should he be convicted in a court of law? Not because I see all this stuff happening. Should he be convicted? I think he should never be eligible to run for office in the United States until after he dies. He should never be able to run for office again. I hold that to be true of all politicians that are convicted in criminal court of things that I think should be disqualifying. So if you can show me the criminal court conviction, I'd be happy to go there with you.
For sure. Well, see, here's my position, and I think that this is the common sense position, right? Is that criminal courts aren't the only mechanism that we have in society that can prove things to be true.
Okay.
I think that criminal courts are one of the more reliable mechanisms that we have to demonstrate that things are true, but they're not the only mechanism that we have to prove that things are true. Another mechanism that we could use to prove things to be true are our brains. And right now I'm using my brain to take the input of the information that Donald Trump is boasting about exploiting women and girls, while then also looking at the corroborating victim testimony from the teens at Miss USA and the women at Miss USA, and then considering the very simple fact that RAIN.org would tell us, which is that only 2% of perpetrators of violence end up getting full accountability in the eyes of the law. And then further yet to build on top of that, there's many reasons why the victims wouldn't have brought this forward into criminal/civil litigation. First and foremost, considering the fact that he was their boss, he signed their checks, he furthered their career. What would the potential social repercussions be for them if they were to be publicly outspoken?
Would it
Or second of all,
stop if I just admit that I agree with your point that all of this corroborates the possibility in your mind of it happening? Because you've been talking for like 15 minutes about the same list of things. That's not even where our disagreement is.
Look at how the goalposts move the second real evidence enters the conversation. When Dean Withers presents the audio tape combined with multiple corroborating statements from participants across different years, the entire defense collapses into procedural excuses. Notice how Michael stops arguing that the action itself was innocent, and instead shifts directly into demanding a formal criminal conviction before he will care. Michael said this: "Should he be convicted, I think he should never be eligible to run for office in the United States until after he dies." This is a massive shift in standards that people use all the time when their side is caught dead to rights. They hide behind the legal system as a shield against obvious reality. But think about how flawed that logic really is when you apply it to leadership. We are talking about whether someone is morally and ethically fit to hold the highest office in the nation, not whether a prosecutor managed to secure a jury verdict within a specific statute of limitations. Dean dismantles this defense brilliantly by pointing out that our own minds and critical thinking skills are tools for processing truth. You do not disable your brain and pretend something never happened just because a courtroom has not ruled on it yet. Throughout history, countless powerful individuals have avoided formal legal convictions due to their wealth, influence, or the social pressures placed on victims to remain silent. If society waited for a courtroom conviction to form an opinion on a leader's character, we would be completely blind to basic ethics. And then watch how Michael tries to dismiss Dean's reasoning when Dean breaks down why victims often do not come forward immediately. Michael said this: "And when you have the question between mines and criminal court, as we need to see any conversation about eligibility for office, he tries to frame the insistence on official court documents as the only valid form of truth, completely ignoring the fact that the candidate literally admitted to the behavior on tape himself." Dean correctly points out the immense power dynamic at play when a wealthy owner controls someone's career and livelihood. Dismissing corroborating accounts simply because they did not go through years of litigation is not being objective. It is choosing to ignore reality so you do not have to confront uncomfortable facts about the person you support.
Our understanding of the purpose of this question was not whether I think Donald Trump is like the greatest man who ever lived. I don't. There's a lot of things I disagree with Donald Trump on. Your question was positing...
do you agree that he looked at these naked women unconsensually?
I agree that I would like to really finish my thought. So where we probably agree is that Donald Trump is not a great guy from a moral perspective. We can probably agree on that wholeheartedly. The question you're asking is, in terms of being able to run for office and being elected by the people of America, that is part of the equation. And when you have that conversation, then the question between mines and criminal court, that becomes a whole lot clearer as to what we need to see before we have any conversation about eligibility for office, especially when when the specific time that we're in right now, what we need to elect, especially considering if you're talking about the primary versus the general. Once you get in the general, I know that you were obviously a Kamala Harris supporter, which is just unbelievable. But assuming that were the case, right, you have both of these as the only two options. Yeah, I'm still taking Trump, even if we verified that in my or your mind.
So you're saying that you'd still take Trump as president, even if you knew that he exploited naked little girls?
What do you mean by little girls?
Minors.
How old is a minor?
Under the age of 18.
Under the age of 18. So if you're asking me for president of the U.S., well, let me ask you first, just so I get a feel of where we're at. What's your standard for what you want to see from a president? What's the standard of what you want to see in terms of actionable things?
Well, I think I have many standards, but I think the right question to ask isn't about the standards, but rather about the red lines, okay? Right? I think it's very fair to hold a red line against a president, like if they're a goddamn pedophile, if they've exploited kids, so they shouldn't be running the most powerful country in the history of planet Earth. Do you agree?
Not necessarily, no. I can't agree. And I'll tell you why I can't agree. So let me ask you this. If the other person was also a pedophile, but said, I'm going to blow up the country, who are you picking in that case, between those two people?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'd pick
No, I'm just asking.
No, that's a good question. If they were both a pedophile, gun to my head, I had to choose one, I'd let the gun go off. But good thing I don't have to do that, considering the fact that Kamala Harris wasn't a pedophile.
Right, but you're talking about red lines. That was just a mere analogy. When you talk about red lines, I actually care far more about the entirety future of my country, the future of my children and my grandchildren, the next fourth and fifth generations, than I care about what Trump was alleged to do.
No, you said if you... No, don't change it now. You said if you knew that he did this as a fact.
Oh, you're saying if there was a conviction in criminal courts. Well, then I would have either been put to death before the election ever came up. That wouldn't even be a question.
Oh, okay, but then earlier when you said even if this was verified in my own mind, I'd still support him, you were lying.
I'm saying if you got to the point where there were two options, I have...
Okay, so option number one, child Trump, or option number two, right, not child Kamala Harris. Who are you picking?
Here's your problem, is that we can all understand that there is a very clear line between somebody who is a 3-year-old, because we have lots of cases like that where I live. I cover them on the radio all the time. There's a very clear difference between a 3-year-old who gets and a 17-year-old girl who, as a joke, someone said they went and saw. If we can't acknowledge that those are two very different things, if we cannot acknowledge that there is a very clear differentiation between those two things, then I think it's all about the rhetoric for you. You talk about the subjectivity of language, and then you come over here and you say, well, he's a child, right? Like, that's the same thing as a 3-year-old getting abused by a person physically. When you're talking about a girl that could turn, say, 18 tomorrow, do you view those as the exact same thing? Honest yes or no?
This is where the debate reaches a complete boiling point, because the level of deflection becomes almost unbelievable. When Michael tries to create a forced choice hypothetical about extreme scenarios to justify supporting his candidate, Dean Withers shuts it down instantly with one of the cleanest responses you will ever hear. Dean Withers said this: "If they were both a pedophile gun to my head, I had to choose one, I'd let the gun go off." That line completely destroys the false dilemma Michael was trying to build. Dean refuses to play the game of choosing between two horrific outcomes just to make a political candidate look acceptable by comparison. When you have to resort to ridiculous end-of-the-world scenarios just to rationalize supporting someone with serious character flaws, you have already admitted that you cannot defend them on their own merit. Instead of taking the loss and moving on, Michael tries to minimize the severity of what took place by splitting hairs over the age of the participants and trying to draw technical distinctions. Michael said this: "There's a very clear difference between a 3-year-old who gets and a 17-year-old girl who, as a joke, someone said they went and saw." Pay close attention to what is happening here, because this is a massive red flag in any moral debate. When someone is forced to sit on stage and start negotiating the exact age limits or minimizing improper behavior toward teenagers as just a joke, they have completely abandoned any moral high ground they claim to hold. Dean calls this out directly. It does not matter whether someone is 17 or 37. Non-consensually invading someone's private changing space as a position of power is wrong, period. Trying to grade misconduct on a curve just to keep your political allegiance intact exposes everything you need to know about where your priorities lie. Dean's refusal to accept these rationalizations is why he completely dominates this entire exchange, leaving Michael struggling to defend a position that should be completely indefensible to anyone with basic principles.
So yeah, I definitely do view the rape of anybody as disqualifying from a trait that I'd like to see in the President of the United States of America. And you're saying, and it just sounds like you're rhetorically trying to downplay the wrongness of a 65-year-old man exploiting the naked body of a kid, which I think explains the right in a nutshell. What we see is people that love to wear these masks claiming to be good people, but then the moment they're hard-pressed on these things and it's exposed that the bad person they fight against in all reality is the president they champion, they take the mask off, and now I have this 24-year-old at this turning point event trying to convince me that maybe I think it's a little bit more wrong than I should think, right, for an older man to exploit a naked
your
kid.
rhetoric. That was all. I was just calling out your rhetoric. I didn't say that you were wrong, that it was evil. As I agreed earlier, like literally 7 minutes ago, you can watch the video back. We both probably agree that Donald Trump, from a moral perspective, is not a great man. We can probably both agree to that extensively.
Well, see, the thing is, I don't think that's enough, though. Because I don't think that, like, my dad is a great man because he divorced my mom. I don't think that...
divorce is wrong?
I don't think that...
Do you think divorce is wrong?
Yeah, I think divorce with no reason, right, is pretty bad.
Divorce is wrong? Do you actually believe that?
I think that divorce with no reason when kids can be morally suggested against.
There we go. It's back to the can be. I was asking you, do you think it's morally wrong for no-fault divorce when there's kids?
Yeah, in the scenario of my dad and my mom, yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering. That'd be a great thing to agree on.
Of course.
Super excited.
Or, you know, like other examples. You know, I don't think that I'm the best guy because a couple days ago maybe I lied to my friend or something like that. I don't think any of us are the best people.
It's
But
okay,
I
you
think
lie on camera all the
attempting...
time.
Well,
It's okay, you lie on camera all the time.
I think that you like to say that I lie on camera all the time because you don't like the truth and you're a little bit afraid of it. And instead of engaging it with reasons, fact, and logic.
I'm shaking in my New Balances. I'm terrified, Dean, really.
Well, thank you for describing your state. That's very kind of you. But anyways, back to what I was saying, specifically on the topic of Donald Trump's exploitation of these women and girls. Okay, you said even if you knew that he did this as a fact, you'd still support him as president today, did you not?
In a specific scenario, sure. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Well, okay. So you heard it here first, folks. If a immigrant enters into this country with the use of undocumented means and commits a federal misdemeanor, this guy thinks that they should be illegally deported with no due process to El Salvador, where they're beaten, tortured, and starved. But if a billionaire white guy from New York turns around and sexually exploits a woman or a girl, they deserve to be thrown in the Oval Office and treated as a god. Anything else?
Oh man, the absolute mask-off moment at the end of this exchange exposes the entire ideology for what it truly is, and Dean Withers delivers a closing summary that completely shatters the entire defense. Watch how the conversation shifts when Dean points out the sheer hypocrisy of demanding perfection from regular people while giving unlimited passes to powerful elites. To highlight the moral grandstanding, Dean asks about personal relationship, and Michael reveals his rigid moral views on everyday issues. Michael said this, "Yeah, I think divorce with no reason right is pretty bad. Think about the absurdity of holding strict moral standards for everyday working people who are just trying to navigate personal hardship while simultaneously bending over backward to excuse, justify, and overlook blatant exploitation committed by a wealthy public figure. That contrast is the entire thesis of modern political hypocrisy." Dean takes all of these threads, the backpedaling, the double standards, the dismissal of victim testimony, and the sudden shift to procedural excuses, and ties them together into one of the most powerful callouts you will ever see in a debate. Dean Withers said this, "If an immigrant enters into this country with the use of undocumented means and commits a federal misdemeanor, this guy thinks that they should be illegally deported with no due process. But if a billionaire white guy from New York turns around and sexually exploits a woman or a girl, they deserve to be thrown in the Oval Office and treated as a god." That is the entire argument in a nutshell. Look at the stark reality of what was just laid out on that stage. If an impoverished person seeking a better life breaks a minor procedural rule, the immediate response from this ideology is maximum punishment, zero tolerance, and the total removal of due process. But when a billionaire with immense social power and resources brags on tape about crossing physical boundaries and exploiting people, the exact same ideology constructs an endless fortress of excuses, minimizes the actions as joke, demands impossible burdens of proof, and insists that he should still lead the nation. This is why this debate segment is so deeply revealing. It shows that for many people, principles are not actual rules they live by. Principles are just weapons used to punish opponents, and shields used to protect their favorite leaders. Dean Withers exposed that double standard with complete precision, leaving his opponent standing there with absolutely no response left. When you strip away all the political rhetoric, the facts speak for themselves, and seeing someone held accountable with their own words is as satisfying as it gets. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.